You are listening to the Enormocast.
Hey, it's your toes, back with another bit of advice. Now I know you love them La Sportiva TC Pros. Great for cracks, off-whists, edging and smearing on granite. And TC, well, he's kind of the godfather. A real made man, if you know what I'm saying. So I don't mean any disrespect, Tommy, but when it comes to us little toesies, sometimes it's nice to feel the rock we're grabbing. And though the fingers get all the fun stuff, the full crimping, the half crimping, 3-finger drag crimping, half 4-finger drag crimping, decaf drag with 2 pumps of vanilla crimping. Turns out us toes can push and pull too, just like that old barefoot Chuck. That guy has beautiful crimpy little toes. A little too beautiful, if you're asking me. And we can't have people not buying shoes now, can we, Chuck? Anyway, that's where La Sportiva's reinvented Mantra slipper comes in. The softest, lightest climbing shoe on the market. Thin, comfy, real sensitive. Just like us toes. You know we have a sensitive side too, and we're happy to remind you of the pain we can feel come ice climbing season. So, in the gym, on steep climbing outside, let your toes feel the rock instead of just knocking around in your shoe like a bunch of ripe walnuts. And get us in a pair of Mantras stat. Go to Sportiva.com or your local shop and treat your toes to a pair of Mantras, and maybe, as a special treat, we'll let you keep all your toenails this year. Oh wait, what? It's mantra, not mantra? What's a mantra?
We gotta get
Listen, where you playing in town? You playing here?
We're doing the Enormo Dome, whatever it is. It's terrific.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
a
the big
house. We
place,
sold
that
it out.
side of town. That's a
Very
big
nice.
place. You sold
What's
it
that,
out.
20,000
I'll see.
seats? We really should.
The hell are you doing? I couldn't sleep. I'm checking the ropes. There was a frayed end on your rope, and I'm cutting it out. Good weather, bad weather. Now or later, anytime, good time.
Today's show is brought to you by Black Diamond Equipment, La Sportiva, and with support from Maxim Ropes. Maxim has been keeping the Enormocast off the deck since 2012.
And don't forget our charter sponsor, Bonfire Coffee. Go to bonfirecoffee.com and enter Enorma at checkout for a discount on great coffee and to support the Enormocast.
And now back to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Enormocast. This is your host, Chris Kalous. It is September 30th, 2022, about 10:15 a.m. here in Colorado. And this is episode 250 of the Enormocast, a conversation with fellow podcaster Ryan Devlin. Ryan Devlin runs the Struggle climbing show. Have you guys listened to the Struggle? Relatively new offering in the climbing podcast world. And personally, I like a nice, cordial, camaraderie, collegial atmosphere among climbing podcasters. I've had a bunch of them on the show. Some folks I had on the show before they were podcasters, and since they've become podcasters, I've helped out some other folks getting theirs started, giving them some advice, of dubious value. But more fascinating to me with Ryan is sort of the swerve in his background. His background is not deep in climbing. It's actually deep in being a Hollywood actor, a quite successful Hollywood actor. And you guys know how I love to delve into those worlds, only peripherally attached to climbing that I don't know about. So we talk a lot about that on this podcast, as well as just kind of commiserate about podcasting and talk about Ryan's background with climbing and some of his philanthropic endeavors as well. Nice thing about these podcasts with other podcasters, other climbing podcasters, is it obviously makes me reflect on my own show, on the experience of doing it for almost 11 years now. I think it's coming up on 11 if I did the math right in December, and makes me the old guy on the block, but it also makes me examine what I'm up to, what I could change, what I could make better, and what I totally appreciate about doing the podcast. And of course, as I've said many times, the audience to this podcast is amazing. It's almost completely positive feedback from my audience. I don't get trolled very hard. I get, obviously some level criticism, which is deserved, but very seldom does anyone just try to slag me off. And I've found that to be sort of amazing in the world of internet fare. Putting things out there on the internet usually results in at least somebody trying to slag you off. So I got to just shout out the appreciation I have for you guys as an audience, as a steady, solid audience. Yeah, love you guys, man. Love you guys. And by guys, I mean sort of the gender neuter kind of thing, like all of y'all, if you will. Everybody's welcome. Everybody's welcome. Not quite everybody. Whoever's chipping those boulders at Joe's and Little Cottonwood Canyon, if you're listening, stop. Just delete the show from your app. Ryan shouts out a statistic in this podcast that there are 7 climbing podcasts. I don't know if that's accurate. Seems about right. But I look at them all as sort of a spectrum. You know, there's kind of what I do, which is, you know, personality driven at one end, and then all the way down to sort of technical performance training podcasts kind of at the other. And I think the struggle shows up in the middle, a little bit of both. You know, he'll talk about hangboards, but he'll also go deep into people's stories. So somewhere in there, you've got the Struggle Climbing Show. Right now, he's got a show out with Tommy Caldwell at this very moment, friend of the Enormocast as well. That's quite good. Tommy always brings it. We know that. He also collaborates extensively with Hazel Findlay. And anytime you have more Hazel Findlay in your life is going to be better. So yeah, go check it out. The Struggle Climbing Show on any of your apps. There's probably a website, but who goes to websites for podcasts? Like many blogs, they're usually woefully out of date anyway. At least mine is. All right, that's enough promoting somebody else's podcast on my podcast. Let's get to the person, the human behind the podcast, the objectively beautiful and charming Ryan Devlin. You smell that? The aroma of crisp Mountain Dew on living cowhide? That dusky scent only means one thing. That's right, September is upon us. Getting up early to mend them fences all summer's about to pay off when them crisp temps let you pull down on holes smaller than a whisker on a tadpole. Dime Edge is going to feel like 10 pesos. They're significantly larger, look it up. And as you gallop into September with a twinkle in your eye and a spur in your buttocks, let Black Diamond be your trusty steed. They got all you need for pebble wrestling, sport climbing, and of course the best traditional climbing protection this old cowpoke's ever seen. If you ain't riding the range with a saddlebag full of Camelots, well son, you ain't cowboy or cowgirl or cowperson. You get my meaning. So when it comes to poking cows, well, that's your business. But as far as climbing goes, nobody has you covered head to toe like Black Diamond. Check them out at blackdiamondequipment.com or your favorite local shop. And though I might have gone too far this time, at the moment, Black Diamond is still a proud sponsor of the Enormocast. So yeah, we're living parallel lives for sure, because we use the same program and then it's all the same shit. You know?
Yeah, but you just do it so much better than I do. I mean, well, you've certainly been doing it a hell of a lot longer than I do. I mean, I think your sound quality is fantastic. I mean, what have you've done like 250 some episodes?
Yeah. I mean, 247 official episodes, but I've released a few other things, so it's like around 260. But
you got the run out as well. I mean, you're like this is a dynasty you've got going here. I'm talking with podcast royalty right now. It really is a pleasure. Like I'm a huge fan of your show, and I've been listening to it forever. So. I
appreciate that. And it was, thanks. And I'm not good at taking compliments. So, but I'm like, I was just there first, And then the other thing is funny because the run out actually is ground zero for most of our internet problems. And I don't know why. I think we record people in Europe a lot on that too. And that's, as we were talking, we have a previous little conversation here about Alex Magos and your troublesome interview because of tech. And we have the same problem because, I mean, he was in the Ukraine, you said?
Yeah. So it was pre-Russian invasion. It was literally like 2 weeks pre-Russian invasion. He was training in Ukraine with like the Ukraine climbing team. It sounded great, but the internet was super, super spotty. It just like we kept cutting out, kept cutting in, but we did an entire fully complete groundbreaking interview. It was my Oprah Winfrey moment with Alex Magos, who doesn't do a ton of interviews. And then
no, he's never responded to my messages. So
yeah, he told me specifically, he was like, if you talk to Kalous, like tell that guy to fuck off. And so, I would have included that in the podcast.
Go pound a carrot.
Totally. You tell him where to shove this carrot.
Carrot.
Carrots for power. But yeah, I get the interview download afterwards, and it was like a 2-hour interview that just covered everything. It was so rad. And then like a good half of it was completely unusable, just complete like snow noise. And so I had to piece together that interview from what I had. And so we literally like the segues are fantastic. He's like, let me tell you about my hangboard routine. I love carrots. And we're like, wait a minute, what? Because there's like 30 minutes of shit that went in between there where he was talking about his hangboards. It's like a mystery for the listener. You can piece together what you think we talked about.
There you go. Go back and listen now and then insert whatever you want in between.
That's exactly right.
You mentioned Alex being like a real big get, as we say, and obviously Yanya was for me, and that went through Rhino and stuff, and then went through her agent and all those sorts of things. So it certainly wasn't like I was just like texting Yanya like, hey, what's up, girl? You want to do my podcast? But
but now you can.
Yeah, exactly. But let me tell you, the coolest thing about that, and the thing I totally appreciated about how professional she was, is that, she insisted that we connect the day before to make sure everything would work, which I was just like, okay, like nobody ever agrees to do that. And she was just like, I'm going to be in Oleana, obviously the internet's not going to be amazing either because it's Spain. And yeah, so she, we arranged a moment just to get on for 5 minutes and make sure it all worked. And I was just like, geez, that is such a dreamboat, like, so.
Isn't that also just like so emblematic of Yanya? Like she's so fucking good at everything she does. It's not a surprise that she's like the best at being a podcast guest as well. Like she flashes every podcast she's on, and yours was no different. I mean, it was such a delightful interview. I loved the humor that she had. That kind of surprised me. Like you guys were just riffing. It was really well done.
Yeah, thank you. And I just like I went in super tense because I've had interviews previously, especially with sort of deep European guests, that there's a little bit of a lost in translation humor style wise, but I went in super tense, and I literally, my shoulders were like by my ears, like, here we go. There was all this prelim with her agent, and it's like, I'm getting this hour, like, don't fuck it up, just like you were thinking with Alex, and like, and then as we went along, I just like fully relaxed, and and it was all her just like putting me at ease, and I started, and actually, I think if you listen to it, you can hear the arc where I'm like, okay, now I'm gonna start, using my funny humor, or what I think is funny, and she reacted, and I think by the end, like the ending note of that thing was a total laugh line, where I made some joke about thinking of me, for her next comp, or I can't remember what it was, but it went out on like a full belly laugh that she did, and I was just like, Jesus, that was gold. Like I was so excited, and back to trying not to deal with compliments, but it was all her. Like I just like was poking around in the dark until she brought it. And it was such a pleasure. So,
well, it doesn't surprise me because she does seem like just, somebody who's just awesome to work with and really cares and wants to do her best. But yeah, don't take too much credit away from yourself. I think that I had a similar experience when I interviewed Lynn Hill on the show last season, where I was like, my background's as an actor in Hollywood. I've worked with like all these megastars and all that, and I don't typically get starstruck. But when Lynn Hill came up on screen, I was like, oh my God, it's Lynn Hill. Like, and I turned into a total awkward, nervous, starstruck, interviewer. And it started really kind of stilted and rough and awkward. And then she like put me at ease, which was great. So I give her credit, for that, and maybe similar to you with Yanya. But then at some point in time, you got to take the ball and run with it. And Yeah, that Yanya interview was fantastic. Send her my way. Do me a solid. What have you done for me lately?
Not much. You're on the show though.
Oh,
Let's just start there.
Yeah.
But and I've yet to do yours. So, although I don't think I fit in with at least your first season's guests, but we'll talk about that another time.
Let's see how this. Let's see how this interview goes first.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay. This is my audition for the Struggle Climbing Show. All right. Now I'm nervous again. Yeah. I mean, Lynn can bring like a pretty serious tone.
She's got like this like kind of Buddhist air to her. I mean, like I think she is Buddhist or kind of practices Buddhist, but yeah, there's like this kind of quiet confidence that could certainly, I think, come off as maybe standoffish to some or intimidating to some. I certainly was intimidated just because of the size of impact she's had on the climbing community, on my life, personally as a climber. But then when we started jamming, like it was awesome. Like she really enjoyed telling the old stories, but also talking about what was coming. And of course, with my show, we enter through a lens of struggle. So like every question I ask is like, where have you struggled with this? Where have you, training or mental game or whatever. And so, it wasn't like, hey, Lynn, tell me about when you fucking styled the changing corners or whatever. It's like, tell me about the struggle of doing XYZ. And so, yeah, it was cool. I learned a lot, through the season. And of course, like I just struggle all the time because I'm kind of just like a mid-grade shitty climber. And so it's always good to connect with people about their struggles when they seem like they don't struggle.
Well, let's move on to talking about you a little bit, and we'll talk more about your show too, because I kind of want to know why the hell you do it. But
yeah, so does my wife.
There's a lot of stuff going on. You sent me an email, mentioned a couple philanthropic things that you do. The acting was interesting. I just popped over to the IMDb. Is it IMDb? Is that
movie database?
Yeah, and it's just, it's a deep and lasting acting career, and and then there's this climbing thing. You also have a family, and you just tossed in podcasting into that. For the hell of it, I suppose, right. or we can sort of get to that. So, you're living in LA, is that right?
No, not anymore. I'm actually living in Kentucky now, Louisville, Kentucky.
Oh, right.
I'm in LA quite a bit, for meetings and work and that kind of thing. But we had our son, my wife and I, we have two kids. We've got a 7-year-old boy and a 4-year-old girl. And when our son was born, we were just like, we got to get the fuck out of LA.
Sure.
And she grew up in Kentucky. Her family was here. I grew up in Michigan. My parents were there. My sister lives in Australia with her family. And so Kentucky kind of seemed like a really good destination where we could have 4 seasons and actually afford a house and, just live the childhood that for our kids that we had, when we were growing up. And then it just so happened, of course, that the Red is day trippable from, where we're at. So it kind of worked out, and been here for 5 years now and love it. It's rad. I don't know how much time you spend out here. There isn't a whole lot of crack climbing here.
I've been to the Red. Part of my youth, I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, and so we were just across the river. And
totally.
And some of my earliest kind of like camping memories come from the Red, which is sort of interesting. Like definitely right in where the climbing is. I can't tell exactly where we were, but I clearly remember like rock walls everywhere. But this would have been in like the late 70s. So, it was only probably the few really, really deep tradsters that were even in there. If anything was getting climbed for real, pre-sport climbing. Before the sport climbing boom and Porter Gerard and, Chris Snyder and all those guys who set a million routes there. But yeah, military wall might have been, now it's probably even pre that. Yeah, it was just all like the trad stuff around there. No, sport climbing, bolting was like non-existent then. So, but anyhow, right. It wasn't on my radar anyway. We were just hiking around. But I definitely have some distinct memories. Also some rock that they still hang glide off of.
Cloud Splitter had like a great trad route that went up it, like it still does.
Yeah.
There's Indian Staircase, of course. There's Natural Bridge. That's probably where you were like hiking and camping.
Yeah,
it's awesome. I go down there with the kids, like
Yeah.
Not to climb. We'll just like hike to waterfalls, and it's super beautiful. I had no idea. First of all, like this is how clueless I was to like the climbing scene of Kentucky. Is when I learned how to climb, it was out in LA, and it was like at it was trad on Talkeets and Suicide Rocks and J Tree and like didn't do much sport at all. And so I was like, oh yeah, I think like there's like this little area called Red River Gorge out, and then it's like 2,400 routes, and it's epic. It's like a sport climber's paradise. So I got into sport climbing more once we moved here than when we were out west. I was mostly just doing multi-pitch.
How did that happen? I mean, you were well into your acting gigs, and how did the climbing thing come about then?
Yeah, it was it kind of just like born from like necessity. Like I was making my living as an actor, but I had also started this company called This Saves Lives, which is like a give back food company. We sell like delicious snack bars and kids crispy treats and kids bars and that kind of thing. We're in Whole Foods and Starbucks and a bunch of places. It's grown into this big thing. At the time, it was a very small thing. And it was a way to try to like make an impact on the world. And so it's like a give back company. For every product we sell, we donate life-saving nutrition to kids around the world. And so me and some actor friends started that to want to do like a little thing that gives back, kind of like Newman's Own. And then it like grew into this, it kind of took on a life of its own. But in the early days, we were doing everything. And I was, running it as CEO, but also like figuring out how to like make granola bars. And it was such a stressful time that when I would go to the gym and just exercise, I would just constantly be thinking about all my work stress and work obligations. It was never a release. And so there was a rock climbing gym next door to like the normal gym I was going to. And I popped in there just to check it out one day. It was like a light bulb. Like I started bouldering and I wasn't thinking about work at all. I was just focused on the moves, and there's like some flow and some fear that come into it. And you can't really think about spreadsheets like when you're trying not to fall. And so, I just felt, I think like a lot of people fell in love with climbing at the gym. Of course, I was 30 at the time. I wish I had discovered it when I was younger, but then I met up with some guys that were really into trad. And so they were kind enough to take me out and show me, gear placements and rope management and, everything that you would like. I needed to learn everything. And they were nice enough to walk me through all of that. And then we just started going on trips out to the Needles, Southern Sierras and in the Kern Valley area, and Joshua Tree a lot. And then like Talkeets, Suicide Rocks, that was kind of like where we went the most. And I loved it. I think, you often ask people on the show, like, what kind of climber are you? Mm-hmm. And like right now I'm a hard trying sport climber at the Red, like trying to push my grade and like pull really hard while I still have some physical acumen in my 43 years that I've been on this planet. But I think in my kind of soft caramel core, I'm a trad dad. And so I really do look forward to getting back into trad more. And even at the Red, there's some trad. So yeah, I think that's where my heart is at. But just right now, I'm like kind of really psyched on sport climbing at the Red with my guys.
Well, I mean, it fits with family life so much better. I mean, bouldering probably fits the best, but I wouldn't know. But yeah, I mean, but just like locally sport climbing or relatively locally it's just so much better for family life, in my opinion. It just fits. You can go out for the half day and get worked, and like, it's not such this big ordeal. You're not going to get home late if you don't want to, all those things. And I don't know, I'm so stuck in it right now, but also like so loving it. I mean, there's this thing about me kind of like not giving up, but putting my sort of big route trad dreams on hold. That's actually been really like, freeing. And like, I don't, because I also, I identify like I'm a trad climber, and, I'll be the first one to tell you about it if you ask, kind of bullshit. And it's nice to just let that go finally and be like, I've done it. I can go back to it. It's just not fitting with my life at the moment. And single pitch crack climbing, that's also works. But as far as like big trips to big routes and stuff, just is great, and once I let that go and I'm like, I'm just a freaking sport climber and I love it.
That's awesome. Do you bring, cause like sometimes I'll even do that. Like I'll bring my kids with me and they'll just play in the dirt while I'm, climbing for a half a day, and then we'll go like hike into some waterfalls or whatever. Like, do you do that often with your son, or do you just try to pop out, focus on your climbing, and then get back before dinner?
Well, the truth is that our kid who's 6, he has some special needs, and he's just not quite there yet as far as like being independent on his own. And we've kind of started to dabble in it and get him. I mean, we've done the sort of 3-person thing where someone's always hanging out with him, but yeah, it's still always a little bit, or has been a little bit trouble that maybe it's not necessarily worth. And also I've been like, well, is he really enjoying this? Is this something that he's into? And or are we just sort of dragging him around? But we're starting to move back into that mode, I think, of
right.
But it's hard to break. Once we got out of it, it's sort of to dip our toes back into it has been a little tricky because we just, you just get used to one thing versus the other. So
yeah, don't get me wrong. I would much rather not bring my kids with me. They always find a way to ruin a send or the day or whatever. I do it out of necessity sometimes.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And we're super local, the climbing we're doing. I don't know how close you are to the red. I think you said it's 2 hours. Ways, but yeah, we're super locals to a lot of the climbing that I do, like an hour, not even for a lot of it. So
perfect.
But yeah, we're getting there, and he's getting better at entertaining himself, and staying put is really the problem.
Exactly.
So
just some webbing and a boulder.
Yeah, right.
You're not going anywhere.
Usually frowned upon. That'll end up on the internet for sure. Like
that's true.
The Enormocast had his kid tied to a boulder for 4 hours or whatever.
Hey, no publicity is bad publicity. Come on.
Yeah. Well, I just had this show that is out right now, actually, about this guy Dustin Bowen, who's a bull rider, right, climber, and that was really fascinating to kind of like, find these two things that don't always go together. And I was thinking about the acting, and actually, not just acting, but being a working actor in LA. Someone like yourself with the depth of resume that you have, it's a super busy life. I'm sure it takes a ton of your energy, and it's in my mind, it's a bit of a different world, right? We actually, on the run out, we did a bonus episode about like famous celebrity climbers of the ages, and and trying to kind of like filter out who's actually like really into climbing, kind of for real, as elitist as that sounds, but you know what I mean when I say it.
It's like Jared Leto and Jason Momoa, they're like real climbers, whereas like others like aren't. Yeah,
there's like a photo op to get into your sort of your resume or whatever. But yeah, I mean, and I lived in LA, which you probably know too, and lived right in West LA, and was at the very first climbing gym up there at this place called Recreation. That's actually
that was my gym.
Still there. Yeah.
I mean, that was the one I walked into when I was telling you about, like, I walked in, I was going to, like, it was Recreation, man. I was there for years, and it probably hadn't, well, I mean, it might have changed a little bit, but I don't, it was still like taped routes. It wasn't like monochromatic routes or any of that. It was probably very similar. Recreation.
Yeah. So
I only lived a few blocks from there, so I would just walk around my bike there.
Nice. Yeah, me too. I mean, when I worked there, I just lived down in Mar Vista. So, which was cool. Like I could spend like weeks without ever getting on the highway, which is kind of the key to sanity, I think, in LA. If you can pull that off, it's really hard. But yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to get at, is that we even then, this was the late 90s, like we were sort of interfaced with the entertainment industry because it was like this new thing, and so people were coming in and we'd recognize people and stuff like that, and but it did seem like a disparate world. So how have you felt about, do you have other acting colleagues and friends who are into climbing, or is it a little bit of a separate world for you too?
It's pretty separate. I know I've taken some of my acting friends like to the gym or out to, like, did you ever climb down at Point Doom? Like they shoot every commercial in Malibu. There's like this shard of rock that comes out of the beach, and the waves crash against it. And there's every car that you've ever seen in the world is parked in front of it, and all these things. And it's like a 5'6" slab on one side, and like a 5'9", a little bit like slightly overhung on kind of the ocean side. But you can hike to the top and set some top ropes. And so I'd bring some acting friends out there, and it's just a fun day because you're like on the beach and you have a drink or whatever, and then like you just try this crazy thing, and you can go up this slab and just be pulled tight on the top rope the whole time. But I never found any actor friends that were like seriously into it. My buddy Patrick Adams, he was the star of this show called Suits, and then he did The Right Stuff on National Geographic, and really talented actor. We did a movie together a while back, and just became buddies. And I got him into climbing. So I'm actually trying to get him out here to the Red, or we're talking about maybe meeting in Vegas, which is just like an easy stop for kind of anyone, and maybe take him up like Solar Slab or something like that, like pretty chill kind of multi-pitch there. I think that goes 5'7", 5'6", 5'7", somewhere around there. But now it's like the celebrities that you see at the climbing gym are climbing celebrities. Like, Sender One opened up over there near LAX, and I've seen Honnold there and Jimmy Chin and Momoa. And it's like whenever anybody comes through to do a press junket, like they kind of go through there. Whereas like Rock Creation is, still this sweet little like neighborhood gym. They're probably not getting the big celebrity draws anymore.
Yeah, that's funny. I mean, the fact that it even exists in that little space still, where these sort of behemoth like gyms have crowded it out is, totally. I don't know, it's kind of cool because it was so, cutting edge when it went in there. I mean, I was there to open it actually.
No kidding.
Because I was working down in Costa Mesa, and then when it opened, a few of us were up there to sort of manage the opening. And it was like, it was a super cool new thing. And it's funny that it's still hanging out. I mean, those walls must be dingy, but don't take that the wrong way, Recreation. We have a we have a lot of respect for that kind of thing. They did do a remodel
when I started climbing. It was probably like when you were there, and then they like opened up the ceilings and added like a workout area upstairs. Now they didn't add climbing to my recollection. I think they maybe expanded the boulder area a little bit, but it's like it gets the job done, and the whole idea is to get outside. Like if your gym is so nice that like you just want to go to your gym and get a cappuccino and climb these incredible routes, like there's less of a motivation to get outside. And I think, the whole point of climbing in a gym or training at all is to prepare yourself to go outside. So it kind of pushed me outside, which was nice.
I kind of like almost feel like I should go Marin on you because I'm as interested in the acting world as I am as sort of your climbing world. So let me go back a little bit and how did you get into acting? What were you like as a kid to like, you talk about struggle like on your podcast with climbing, but there's nothing that's lower percentage than trying to kind of make it in Hollywood. I mean, that's like just a known fact that it just chews 90% of the people up and spits them out. And it's such a theme of that road, So what made you, the kind of kid or young person that was like, I am gonna do this, I just imagine you on the dusty road, waiting for the bus with your little satchel and your mom in like a floral dress, like waving goodbye with a tear in her eye kind of thing.
Right. It's it's the Dust Bowl all of a sudden.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, I've just.
Did you grow up in the Dust Bowl? I don't think so, right? No.
I think I've just always been like a really beautiful person, like a physically beautiful, like physically attractive. I'm just kidding. He's not like, literally, you're like, fuck, is he going for this right now?
Yeah. All right, let's do it.
Yeah, sure. God. This is going to get taken out of context and people are going to be like, that Ryan's a real asshole.
That's going to be my pull quote. There you go. I'm going to do like he does on the Nugget.
Yeah, I've just always been a beautiful person. I mean, I just class clown, kind of probably not a unique story, like just was like always yucking it up with my friends in class and that kind of thing. And then I had a teacher in 5th grade, Mr. Foley, who was an actor. He did like local theater productions, and he fortunately, rather than like steering me towards detention, steered me towards drama. And so through that, I started doing like local productions and excuse me,
where was this?
I'm losing my voice a little bit. I sound like one of your Sportiva ads. Hey there, buckaroos. Your ads are so good, by the way. Like I got a background in Hollywood production and writing, and like I am genuinely entertained. Like I do not skip your ads. I skip everybody's ads except for yours.
Thanks.
You got something good.
I think I cracked the code with the skipping of the ads, but maybe not. I mean, I'm sure plenty of people are like, "Oh, these ads are dumb." Anyhow, but back to your story.
Yeah,
where was this happening though? Real quick.
So Grand Rapids, Michigan. That's where I grew
Michigan.
up.
That's right.
Near Lake Michigan, kind of west side there, and started doing like local theater productions, Charlotte's Web, like children's theater and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Was super into it until like high school. And then I got into sports. I played hockey and I played lacrosse and I smoked like, pounds of weed and just, did like what every high schooler does. Or maybe not every high school, every middle class white male high schooler does, which is just like sports and drugs. And then, I went to Michigan State University and I studied business. But the whole time I was like, I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to go out to LA and give it a shot. And so I did. So I graduated college with a degree in business, turned down like some kind of normal job offers, and just said like, I got to try this. And so I drove my mom's car out there and got a bartending job. And like, it's it's cliche, but like, I met my manager while I was tending bar at this, restaurant. And she was like, I'll give you a shot. Like, let's send you out on some things. And so one of the earliest auditions I got was to host a show on Spike TV. I don't even know if Spike TV's around still.
Yeah, I don't know.
It was like
did it become Vice or something? I don't know. Yeah, I remember.
But anyway, it was like this kind of extreme sports variety show where it was like there were sketches, but then you would have like some famous snowboarder on or a BMXer or whatever. It was very like X Games, the TV show. So when I went in for that, I made a fake resume. So I had my, you have your headshot and then you have a resume. And I entirely fabricated my resume with all of these like things that I thought would appeal to the producers of this. So it was like sketch comedy show at Michigan State University and extreme sports show for a totally made up TV network in Michigan. And like, I was like, literally all they have to do is fucking Google or make one phone call and they'll see that I'm full of shit. But if they don't, maybe I'll get this job. And they didn't. And so I got the job. And so then after that, after lying my way into my first job, then I actually had some tape and like a real resume. And so then I just built from that, getting little guest starring roles. And I guess like if I had like a big break, it might have been this show called Veronica Mars that starred Kristen Bell, who's a friend of mine. And we actually started that company together. This Saves Lives.
When you were talking about that, and then I saw that on the IMDb thing. I was like, oh, this must have all happened on set, that these folks became friends and started this other company. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. And she's from Michigan. Yeah. We just kind of like hit it off right away. And she's the hero of the show. And then I was brought in to play the bad guy. But so I met Kristen kind of like, it was just like, it was good laughs because we would have these scenes where we were like fighting or like she electrocuted me and I punched her and, and then we would just like hang out. And so it was a cool time because at that time when you're in your early 20s and you're doing a show, and we shot down in San Diego, so we were all in a hotel, like you just kind of would hang out with the people that you would work with. And so it was like being at camp. The relationships formed under that short amount of time were very rich and deep because you were just with these people constantly. So yeah, Kristen and I became good friends on that. And in that show really is probably what helped me like generate a bunch of momentum for the other acting work that I got. But still like such a struggle, like such a grind. It was never easy for me. It's not easy for me. Like I still audition for 100 things a year and book one or two. There's times where you're a little bit hotter or a little bit more of an attraction to casting directors or whatever. And then there's times where it's colder and you're like yesterday's news. And so that's why I love living in Kentucky, because you're kind of out of it. You experience this in LA. In LA, it's like every billboard is a movie or TV show, every bus ad, like you can't get away from Hollywood. It's so like suffocating. But, in Kentucky, there's like some novelty to acting. And in LA, you're like, I'm an actor. And everybody's like, ugh, they're rolling their eyes, but out here, they're like, oh, cool. Tell me about it.
Yeah. Now, do you have a script you want to submit? I'm working on it. I'm writing it right now. But I mean, I remember that. And it's funny because, even as dirt, I was super dirtbaggy then. I was working in a climbing gym, but mostly part-time. And that was it for my income and trying to climb as much. But we would interface. You would just, like you said, you would just be around these people and like interface with them. And And I was so cynical about it all, just like when they'd come into the gym, I'd just be like, that guy can't even climb, like big deal. It's like, that was in my 20s, like that's your only measure of worth. Like, how hard does he climb? Right. He doesn't climb for shit. Okay, well, I don't care what show he's on then or whatever, And
by the way, it's such a good, if you could just buy into that, fortunately you're far less cynical now, Chris. So it's good.
Exactly.
You've really grown.
Again, going back to the theme of your show, the struggle climbing show, and you talk to people, about failure as much as you talk to them about success. In fact, more so, I think. And, going back to that Magos interview, he talked about that, how it's like no one hears about the 100% or 99% of failure. They only hear about the sends. And, it's the acting thing is the same. We don't see the 100 auditions. We see the couple things that you got. Right. But the thing that's interesting about it, and I think is unique and makes people who have gone through what you went through, and are going through, in a sense, although you're reasonably successful now, is an armor that I think is super impressive. And the amount of rejection kind of even puts writers and stuff to shame, the amount of rejection they get, which is legendary, right? But the amount of rejection you can get, some of it, and maybe you can back this up or not, can be quite harsh. And, maybe you get direct notes that, pick on your personality and your looks and all these things that you can't necessarily change. And yet you just keep going at it. And I think it just takes an interesting personality, of confidence, or like I said, an armor or an ability to rebound. If you do get down and you're like, fuck this, I'm out. Do you know what I'm getting at? It's like it's an impressive amount of shit that you can take and just still be like, I'm gonna make it, or I'm gonna get the next one or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Like, can you talk a little bit about that and whether or not I'm onto something as far as a personality trait that might go through a lot of your colleagues as well as yourself?
Yeah, it is interesting. No, I mean, for sure, the business chews people up and spits them out. Like, if you don't have a tough skin, or maybe what's more critical is if you're pegging your self-worth to the outcome of what other people say, like, it is such a losing formula. And to make a kind of a parallel to climbing, I talked with Hazel Finley about this during the mental game kind of recap episode where we looked back on, the mental game of all of our prior episodes. And, she was saying very similar, like a lot of the pros talked about a fear of failure. Alex Magos talked a lot about that in that film Rot Punked that he did, focused on that. Like, you see it with a lot of pros when they punt or something like that, and they're screaming and swearing. As Hazel says, like, sometimes if you really connect your self-worth to the outcome of a climb or a competition, you can get pretty dark for a while. And with Hollywood, to your point, it's maybe even more personal because people are literally rejecting you. And they're also accepting you. So if you get the job, you can immediately inflate your ego. You're like, I'm fucking awesome. I beat all those people out. Or if they reject you, you can immediately take it super personally and be like, God, like, they don't like me. And so if you're like that, I think you don't last. Like, I think you really flame out. For me, the antidote, I don't know what other people do, like what tricks they do, but like what I do is that I have to have other things that I'm passionate about and that bring purpose and self-worth to my life that are beyond acting, because acting is so far out of your own control. So I find things that are in my control. And so for me, that's like these other like entrepreneurial ventures that I do. Podcast is one of them, right? I write, produce, host. I'm in control of the Struggle Climbing Show. This Saves Lives, is the food company that I started. I started a forest preschool out here in Kentucky. There was other like things that I did. I did a lot of volunteer work when I was living in LA, just like anything that could kind of give me some sort of fun. Climbing was a huge one. Like, I could plan a trip and get our gear together and like all these things so that when I would walk into an audition on Monday or Tuesday, there could be a little bit of I don't give a shit about this. And if you have that, it's like catnip to producers. They're like, wait a minute, he doesn't care? we must have him, like the second you care, they're like, oh, we don't care about that guy. He cares too much. It's like antithetical to what it should be. It's 100% dating. It's 100% dating. Oh, he doesn't want me. I must have him. So like there's got to be like a healthy dose of that. Now I do have friends who really care, like where acting is their purpose in life. And they come at it a different way than I do, where for me, acting was always like a really fun way to make money and afford me some freedom to do other cool things. But I've kind of like everything I do in my life is kind of that. I try to go into it with like a sense of even rock climbing. Like I try to step up to a climb and just be like, yeah, it could go. It might not go. I don't care. There's 10 other things that I want to do today anyway. And part of it's like a device, like where I'm trying to trick myself. And part of it, right. I think is just maybe my personality.
Well, I mean, you were lamenting starting in your 30s. And so, and that's kind of a physical lament. But the truth is that a lot of what you're saying, it comes with maturity and life experience. And you brought that life experience of acting and to climbing, and thinking of my own evolution with that, because I feel in a lot of ways the same way these days about climbing. Like, it'd be great if I send tomorrow, but if I don't, I'll just go back another time or whatever. That didn't necessarily exist for me in my 20s when I was more angsty. So just to you talk a lot about mental training, and with your show, that's like a fringe benefit of having started a little bit later too, is I think you get to bypass that hang up with your ego.
I think that's a good point. Yeah. It's interesting. Parenting is the same thing. I'm not sure if this has been your experience as well, but like, didn't have kids until I guess I was like 35 when my son was born, and 40 when we brought my daughter home. My daughter's adopted. And like, I could imagine like if I was in my early 20s, like leaving holes in walls throughout my house. But now I've like got a little bit more patience and perspective where I can like, these kids are like literally trying to ruin me every single day. And like, I can take it. And then like, and then they love me and I'm like, okay, good. But like, if I was 20, I don't know if I could take it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I was even older when my boy came into the world. So, but yeah, I just kind of a perspective. So you talked about meeting and making friends on sets, particularly the friends that you started This Saves Lives with. Do you have a social and community within acting in a way that we create these communities within climbing? I mean, there's the good and bad. Like, most people will point out to me that, almost all of my good friends are climbers, and I don't have that many good friends outside of it, other than some old childhood friends, which may be sort of limiting in perspectives. And of course, all we do is talk about climbing, blah, blah, blah. But it's really easy to form these close-knit communities within climbing. What about within acting or within that world?
Yeah, I think like whenever you kind of are in the trenches and then start to rise through the ranks in anything, you like form really strong bonds. And so in the Hollywood community, in the acting community, I would take a lot of classes. I was like in acting classes for years. I think some people just like land in LA and they're like, I can do it, or, whatever. But for me, like, I really wanted to take it seriously. And I'm glad I did, because these acting classes, while we all started as complete unknowns, like people just fresh off the bus from Topeka or whatever, for years, I was in the same acting class with these same people, and everybody started booking things, and everybody started like working, and you started to see them. And now they're all far more famous and accomplished than I am, which is awesome. They're probably like, oh yeah, Ryan, yeah, too bad for Ryan. He didn't quite make it. He lives in Kentucky and rock climbs. But
yeah, but I bouldered V3.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I bouldered V3, you assholes. And I'm happy.
In the gym. I mean, some people said it was V2, but right. The tag said V3.
It was V2/3, and I choose 3. Okay. So like, it's cool because we kind of rose through the ranks, and now like these people are creating shows. They're showrunners, they're directors, they're actors, they're mega movie stars, but we all started on the same level. And I think climbing as a parallel, like oftentimes there's that, like wherever you start, you typically find people around your ability. And if you're lucky, maybe some people who are a little bit better than you, so they can teach you something and you can grow from their skills. But like, there aren't probably a whole lot of like 5-6 climbers hanging out with mid-14 climbers, like you just kind of like settle in and you start to rise through. And so I met these guys here, like at this gym in Louisville, Jeremy, Johan, and Nikolai. And like, basically just, I was new and I was like, hey guys, will you be my climbing friends? And they took pity on me. And now now we're bros and we go out to the Red all the time, along with other group, like the community has grown. And now I've got a ton of climbing partners and we train together and we climb together. And so I'm like very fortunate, I think, to have like a little bit of a Hollywood cohort and a little bit of a climbing cohort. And I think the climbing cohort is, I guess it's just like a little bit more real, like you still just mostly talk about climbing when you're with your climbing friends. And when I'm with my Hollywood friends, we mostly still just talk about like the biz. And so I guess maybe it's just nice that I have a couple, but now I'm also like becoming friends with my kids' friends, parents, and that's just a little bit more like normal. It's not like climbing or acting. It's just, they're engineers and we just talk about the weather. I don't know. Socializing is really weird. I have, it's kind of hard. I like the climbing community because by and large, like, you're going to have something to like talk about and hit it off with,
Exactly. That's exactly right. I mean, we talk about other stuff, but at least we can fall back.
Yeah, exactly. Climbing. And like, I don't know if we talk about other stuff.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I always, whenever I get home from a trip with my buddy Corey, who's 51 as well. And Steph's always like, so what'd you guys talk about today? I'm like, I don't know, stuff. Or like, right. She's like, how's Brandy, which is Corey's domestic partner. I'm like, I don't know. She's like, well, didn't he talk about her? I'm like, I don't think so. So it's like,
no, because literally it was 4 hours of beta talk. Like that's just what it is. But like every once in a while you work
come on, yelling come on at each other.
Like, come on. And it's like, oh, like every once in a while you're at a rest and you're like, okay, I think after this I'm going to like left Gaston. And by the way, like kind of got into a fight with my wife last night. And then I'm going to grab that undercling, and like you just like kind of pepper in a little bit of domestic stuff.
Yeah, sure. Did you meet your wife out in LA?
I did. She's
cool.
Way out of my league. She was best friends with my sister, who was also in LA working in the business. And I just never thought I had a chance with her. She's a few years older and she's a very successful screenwriter. She writes movies. She's, so talented and beautiful. And I'd known her for years, hung out with her for years and was just always like, not a chance, and then one day, like I was single and she was single. We were always in different relationships like it never was even a possibility. And then like one day we were both single at the same time and we were like, let's go for a hike just for the hell of it. And then 6 months later we were engaged. It was like immediate. As soon as we knew there was chemistry, because we had known each other for so long, we were like, obviously that's a cool person, or we liked each other. We knew each other. And then like, as soon as there was chemistry, we were like, oh, it's on. So it's great. And so as she's a writer, so she can kind of write from anywhere. And so, living here in Kentucky works out. It was also nice that she wasn't an actor. I dated a lot of actresses prior to meeting Kara, which is just what you do as an actor. Like you're on set and you meet someone and then like all of a sudden you're dating because it's just kind of like the formula. But it's really hard. Like two actors, there's just like too much ego and insecurity in one relationship to handle. It's nice to have a screenwriter and an actor where we understand each other's worlds, but we're not in each other's worlds. So yeah, it worked out really well.
When you guys decided to move out of LA, I would imagine that there was some consternation or maybe other people saying like, what are you thinking? You're going to like, it's going to be the end of your careers or whatever if you move to frickin' Kentucky, which totally I can only imagine what your non-Kentuckian acting friends think of Kentucky. And they're mostly right.
They literally think that we're neighbors with Mitch McConnell. They're like, how's Mitch doing? I'm like, there's cool people. I promise there's cool people.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, what was the consternation? I mean, because it feels, I think when you're there, it's the hub and it feels like if you step outside of it, you're going to be forgotten instantly and that's the end of it.
Yeah. I mean, I pretty much was.
Oh, bummer. That's why you're now a podcaster.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm making these big podcasts.
It's almost as exciting.
Yeah. Had to buy a computer brought in some sponsors, almost covered the cost of the computer, and then I worked for 200 hours for free.
Yep.
So, like, I wish you'd warned me.
Yeah, well. Hey, if you'd have asked, I would have, by the way. Sorry.
I should have. You know, when I talked to Stephen Dimmitt, he was like, I sat down with Chris and he told me all about the things. And Stephen encouraged me to start the podcast and was very, very supportive and helpful. And now I'm like, damn it, I should have talked to Cluse because you would have been more cynical on the whole thing. You would have been like, just don't do the podcast.
Yeah, no, I totally was like with Steven. I was like, and he's like extremely successul and way more successful, I think, as a business than, he's killing it. But I was just like, dude, first of all, you can't do one a week. Like, that's insane. So it's like, you're going to fucking kill yourself, dude. Like, don't do that. And yet here, I mean, literally he's just blown business-wise, he's blown me out of the water. So my advice was not necessarily the right advice for him, but maybe would have been for you. But
well, it's anyway, too late now.
It's too late now. Back to my original question. Then, so you've moved out of there and kind of changed flows. What was that like?
Well, I still act. Like, you know what's nice is like I still have like a foot in kind of both camps. I was just out in New Mexico recently, shooting like this indie action film that a friend of mine directed. I mostly do things now that I've got like a personal connection to the project so that I don't have to grind so hard to get the work because my livelihood now does not depend on acting, which is a nice place to be, but I still really enjoy acting. So every once in a while I'll host a show or I'll pop out and I'll be the murderer of the week on some, procedural Law and Order type thing. Or like I just was in New Mexico doing this gig. So I'm still in touch with my friends that are far more successful than I am. We still talk, we still hang out. When I'm out in LA, we party or we'll, just talk about kids or, whatever the topic du jour is now. And then Kara is a screenwriter. And so she'll like, maybe if she's got a movie in production, she'll be out on set or we'll go to visit, the set. And so Hollywood's cool. Like, it's really exciting. It's very, it's very intoxicating to be on set and to be around the making of something that's going to enrich the world in some way, even if it's like kind of some shitty reality show like, I've hosted in the past, or if it's like something that is artistically something I'm really proud of. No matter what, it's just awesome to be a part of it. I think people who like crap on it like are, I don't know, maybe it's a self-protection mechanism. Like, it's hard to not be on set and be really enamored with like Hollywood, or I just always have been. I've always just loved like that kind of stuff, like bloopers videos and things. Like, I always just loved like a peek behind the curtain of how things are made. So like I still get a taste of that, but then like I live in Kentucky and I run a forest preschool part-time and I do this podcast and I act sometimes. And I also am involved in This Saves Lives. And so like, I'm more now kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. And I think my personality lends itself to that. Like I like to have a lot of irons in the fire. I don't think I've ever done really well when there's just like one thing that every waking moment kind of was focused on. Some people do that. And I really sometimes envy that personality type, but it just, for me, like I've always liked to dabble, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. It's a wandering answer.
No, that's fine. So do you still have, you must still have like the Aquaman dreams, like the big daddy break that's, going to make you a superstar.
Yeah, I think it would be cool. I certainly like see some of my friends on screen in some of those roles. And I'm like, God, that must be amazing. And I think for the most part it is, like when I talk to my friends who do that, but it's also like,
they're like, no, this is terrible.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, tell me what sucks, go at it through the lens of struggle. Tell me right. how like, give me the struggle of being a multimillionaire. And they're like, it's awesome. So like, God damn it. Yeah, like I think it would be cool to do that. And I haven't ruled that out. I just kind of have, I'm in a season right now with like the kids where they're at an age where it would be hard to go away and do like a 6-month movie somewhere on location. I like being home. I like being available for the kids. But I think that I've got enough of an acting resume and foundation where I'll always have an opportunity to get the next break, which is cool. I'm just not going after it super hard right now. the podcast, I'm just waiting for that big podcast break.
Yeah, the big podcast break is around the corner.
This is it. It's happening now.
This is
the Enormo break, the Enormo bump.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's coming. Yeah, that just means you're going to be able to get a better link on your next go. That's all you're going to maybe get.
I'll take it.
I'll take the credit for it though. Anyway, all right. So let's do the podcast a little bit more. You got all this stuff going on. Again, a couple different philanthropic type things. You've got your career as an actor, you've got a family, and you enjoy climbing. And so you decide to start a climbing podcast and throw it into the mix. A little bit about why and maybe start to get in all the joking aside about monetary compensation. What are you getting out of it?
Oh God, I mean, nothing monetarily. So we'll start there, but
we'll put that away.
Maybe one day, but that certainly wasn't the motivation. The motivation was, I've become really serious about climbing in the last, handful of years. I always loved it. I was always passionate about it, but I've become very serious about wanting to maximize the return that I get out of putting into it. I've been very focused on trying to train and rise through the grades. Like I said, while I'm kind of still am able to some extent, climb these really steep routes here at the Red. And so I've consumed a ton of climbing content, podcasts, and of course, all the senders and, dosage films and this kind of thing. And in listening to every podcast under the sun, I started recognizing that there wasn't one that was scratching the itch that I had, which is something that was pretty short formatted and focused in a way, in maybe a more scientific way, if you will, on climbing, training and performance. And so that's kind of the format of the struggle came from that. And so for people who haven't listened to the show, the format, every episode that I talk to, I have a season of 10 where I talk to 10 elite guests, and every episode follows the same exact format. I ask them where they've struggled in their training, nutrition, tactics, and mental game, and what it taught them. So, last season 1, I had everyone from Emily Harrington and Alex Magos to Kevin Jorgensen and Alex Honnold and Drew Mack and Lynn Hill. And so people that represent boulderers to big wall climbers to sport climbers. And they all answer those questions. Where have you struggled in your training, nutrition, tactics, and mental game? And then at the end of the season, I bring on 4 experts, an expert in each one of those areas, to look back and say, okay, were there common threads here? What are some patterns? What can we as normal climbers learn from where the pros have struggled? And the entering point of struggle just came from I just struggle as a climber. I've just always been fascinated with struggle. I've always liked taking on things where the odds are kind of stacked against me. We talked about acting and, entrepreneurship and all of that. And so, kind of the common misconception is that, well, Emily Harrington doesn't struggle with big walls, or Alex Honnold doesn't struggle with mental game, or Alex Johnson doesn't struggle with finger strength. And then you get into these conversations and the answer is of course they do. They're humans who want to do the best that they can. And so they struggle just at a different level than we do. And so if I talk to my climbing heroes, 10 of my climbing heroes, and everybody's climbing heroes to some extent, I'm sure, and find out where they struggle in these areas and what they've learned from that, can I learn from that? And can an expert help us to learn from that? So Dr. Tyler Nelson looked back on training and found patterns from all of these pros' struggles in their training. And Eric Hurst looked back at tactics, and Caitlin Holmes looked back at nutrition, and Hazel Finlay looked back at mental game. And so then we started to glean at the end of the season kind of some big takeaways where I think we normal climbers might be able to kind of level up our training and our performance and our mental game. And that's what I wanted when I was listening to all these podcasts. I also wanted something that was pretty short. So all my episodes are less than an hour because I'm pretty busy. And so it takes me a long time to listen to a 3-hour podcast. So I tried to take all those things and bake it in, and people seem to really like it. I don't know. I got season 2 that's coming up soon, and another big lineup of names and hopefully, takeaways and struggle. But I just wanted to contribute something to the climbing community, honestly. And so I've got some sponsors where I get some free product and a little bit of money to help pay for the computer that I've talked about, but that's not really the name of the game. I'd like to make more money on it. I'm putting a ton of time into it, but it wasn't a means to income. It was a means to just try to make something that I hope has benefit to the community. And for me, like just honestly, an excuse to be able to talk to some of my climbing heroes and nerd out over climbing for a little bit.
You know, when you entered into booking these shows, you know, it's always kind of surprised me, like who you can sort of get just by like shooting a message to versus like who has various, various kind of layers you got to go through. And,
sure.
And, you know, the impetus for me starting the show is that at least at the time, and this was 12 years ago, that it felt like I kind of knew everybody that I really wanted to talk to. Like I had a personal relationship with a lot of people.
Sure.
But, you know, since then I think there's been a whole new layer of professional climber kind of layered on even in the last 10 years, where you're dealing with like actual agents and things like that, which is, you know, from your world is not unusual. So what did it feel like to, you know, get through to these people, and, you know, were you surprised, elated, like, holy cow, you know, this person just sent me a message on Instagram, like,
totally.
You know, what I'm getting at too is something I've always said that's really interesting is that, you know, our superstars are kind of among us. That's changed a little bit, especially when you're talking about kind of like Euro level superstardom, but they're still just here climbing on the same shit we're climbing on, which is just this really unusual world that's not as stratified, I think, as most other professional sports or even a place like acting where, you know, there's superstars that are untouchable in a lot of ways. But anyway, back to the actual question is, you know, how was booking and was it interesting to, you know, suddenly be kind of privately chatting with these folks?
Yeah, I do love that about the climbing community, where it's at, where the sport is at right now. Like you said, you know, Europe's a little bit different, but I'm sure the pros, especially here in the States, don't love it because they're like, Jesus, I'd like to be able to pay some bills, you know, but the sport is so small. You know, when my dad was growing up in Detroit in like the, you know, late 40s to kind of mid 50s, he would just walk down the street and some of the biggest Detroit Tigers baseball players were like on the streets amongst him in these like working class houses, like just mowing their lawn. And you think about that now, like obviously there's none of the big baseball players are living in working class neighborhoods in Detroit, right? They're in like, they've been put on this hill. Climbing kind of reminds me of those stories my dad would tell me in that sense. Like you can just run into these amazing men and women at the crag and they'll give you a catch or they'll give you some beta or they'll come over, and like a lot of them, almost all of them are super accessible in that way. They're living in condos in Vegas or they're sharing apartments in Salt Lake City. And again, I think our sport is going to move away from that sooner than later. And again, probably much to the enjoyment of pro climbers because they should be making more money for what they're doing. No doubt. And I think it's moving that way. But right now we are in this interesting time. So I just straight up reached out to a lot of these people, you know, like through Instagram messages. I think it probably helped that like they could Google me and be like, oh, he hosted a lot of TV shows, you know, like I hosted a show with Al Gore about the environment, and a lot of climbers are into the environment. That's how I got Alex Magos, you know, and so like he could check out and say like, oh yeah, Ryan is into the environment. He did host a show with Al Gore. He will probably be a somewhat adept podcast host and, you know, not ask dumb questions. Whereas others, they were just personal intros, you know, where maybe I interviewed one of these people and was like, hey, I've really been trying to connect with so-and-so. Would you mind, you know, if this wasn't a terrible experience, you know, like I had a good time with Alex Honnold last season and Jordan Cannon, Jordan, friend of the show, of course. And both those guys invited me out to go climbing with them in Vegas, which was like the dream day of my life. But then I just, you know, asked Alice, I was like, hey man, like Tommy, Tommy's like a dream guest for me for season 2. And he was gracious enough to connect. And so Tommy and I just chatted for season 2. And
you caught him right in the middle of a struggle too.
The biggest struggle, dude. I mean, like, so.
I mean, not to laugh, but he's had a rough year with injuries. So.
It happened. So he hops on, this was a couple weeks ago. So season 2 hasn't aired yet. I'm putting it all together right now. But a couple weeks ago, so this is like early August, Tommy hops on. And I'm like, Tommy, so good to meet, man. Like, how are you? He's like, well, yesterday I re-ruptured my Achilles. So it was the next day. I was like, first of all, I was like, holy shit, did I just get a scoop? But then he went and ruined it by posting it on Instagram. I'm just kidding. But the outpouring of support.
Didn't wait several months for you to put
I know. I was like,
can
you just hold on this? Because I've got a long editing timeline. But we did talk a lot about that. And yeah, there was much struggle to be had in the Tommy interview. And I'm really excited for that one to come out. But, also, I want to say, too, like I reached out to a ton of people who just ghosted me and said no, or either said nice kindly, or just like didn't ever respond, or referred me to a manager who was a jerk. And so, the people that represent season 1 were, you can look back at my season and say, those are some really kind people, because I had a totally unproven format and just reached out and was like, hey, man, will you give me an hour of your time? And they said yes. And they're some of the biggest names in rock climbing. And they also happen to be very nice people. So I'm happy with that. And I'm continuing to go after the people that I think would be amazing for the show. And some of them are saying yes. And some of them are just saying like, I'm too busy right now, or how about next season? And like, I get it, like you don't get everybody you want.
Yeah, no, I get ghosted all the time. All the time. And I just pound my fist and I'm like, do you know who I am? Like, you do not say no to the Enormocast.
The Enormo bump.
Or do you not say nothing, but it's fine. It just happens.
You've gotten the most incredible guests and multiple times. And that's a testament to your show as well. When you see people come back again, like I think they have a good time. They feel safe. They probably get something out of it. And I think most pros recognize, maybe not all of them, but I think most pros recognize that, you give up something. Maybe you give up 90 minutes to talk about some things that you've talked about 1,000 times in the past, but you also get an opportunity to reach new people who are psyched on the sport. And if you're smart, maybe talk about your sponsors a little bit. And that's always an opportunity when you're giving press or publicity, is to like, talk about how great that Red Bull tasted, or how sticky that Friction Labs is, or whatever it is.
I'm going to cut that shit out, though. They know that. So that's
not me. Problem. You can come on, be like, the struggle and do all your commercials. Everybody who's saying no to Chris.
Cut. Oh, no, that sounded dumb. Cut. That was non sequitur. Cut.
That's great.
Yeah. I mean, I also have sort of a rule. Like an unwritten rule that the more you want to do the show, the less likely I am to book you. Literally, like when anybody's like pitching me on somebody, I'm like, really? Do we? Okay.
You should be a casting director out in Hollywood. You would do great.
Yeah, exactly. Oh,
you want this?
No, I mean,
no, it's a pass.
No, well, can I get back to you? Or I do the ghosting. Not really, but it's always like, well, we got to talk about something besides that, like no one's going to want to hear about that. So,
well, you were very generous to invite me on the show here. I appreciate it. I just noticed that we haven't been recording. Is that normal or?
Yeah, dude, don't even. That's like, you probably haven't done that yet. You haven't been in the game long enough.
Oh God, have you done that?
I have.
Have you done a full interview without pushing record?
No, like 25 minutes.
Oh God, worst nightmare.
Dude, get ready. It's going to happen if you do it long enough.
How do you break that to the guest? You blame it on them, don't you?
You just do. I've lost a couple. Got overwritten. Or the SD card, fell apart or whatever. But yeah, it's all survivable, dude. It's just part of the game. You're in the business. Like, how much fucking useless footage do they shoot? So anyway, but back to the thing I was getting at. I'm curious because, new podcasters, I get a lot of questions about it. And I know that it's also tricky, to be, when I was like first starting it, my problem was simply explaining what a podcast was. Like, that was like the first part of the pitch was like, you're doing a what now, and it's a what now. Totally. So it's kind of like the radio. But I survived a long time just on that momentum, and new people dropping into it. I'm just kind of like, well, now you're sort of fighting with a whole bunch of other folks trying to get people on the show. So I was just kind of curious about how your experience was. But it sounds like it's exactly the same as mine. Some people are into it, other people aren't, and you just move on as best you can.
Totally. And I think that ultimately, perspective's a funny thing, because we're in it right now and we're like, oh, the landscape is saturated. There's 7 rock climbing podcast shows. In 10 years, there's going to be 50 rock climbing podcast shows. Like, podcasting is still as kind of mature as it seems. It is still very Wild West, I think. Like, there's going to be massive commercial podcasts coming in, to the climbing space. Every brand is going to have it. Like, you can just see it because the format is television and streaming. And so, what if when Netflix came in and then Amazon Prime, everybody else was like, well, they got it. I guess streaming is done. Disney Plus just surpassed Netflix for the first time in subscribers. That was unthinkable just a few years ago. And so there's plenty of room. I don't get competitive. I freaking love your show. I love Eric Hurst's show. I love Stephen Dimmitt's show. I love, Power Company shows that go out. I love Nina and Hazel shows. I mean, I listen to them all. I post about them all. Your interview with Dustin Bowen, I thought was fantastic and really fun and entertaining. And so I don't see it as competitive. I just I think right now we're all kind of doing slightly different things anyway. The struggle, there's nothing really out there like the struggle. Maybe one day there will be, and I will crush them. But until then, I support every other show, and
I will go to their mom's basement and crush them.
Totally. I'll pull their extension cord out of the wall, cut it with scissors. Yeah, I think there's just such opportunity, and also, as we know, the sport is growing so fast, and sometimes to the cynical lament of run out conversations, or when you're doing your taps and these kinds of things, or is it too crowded, is it dead, these kinds of things. But in a non-joking way, the sport is growing in a big way. Right. That's a good thing, and all of these people are going to be hyped. They're so psyched on the sport. They want content, and so I'm really happy to be able to contribute in some small way to that. And I think others are going to come into the fold and fill other gaps, and then you'll crush them.
Yes,
and so we'll go from there.
No, my strategy is as things get more and more slick and better, mine's just going to get shittier.
Counter-programming.
Yeah, just because I just want to be the old shitty one that's still out there doing his thing. So that's my plan.
Is there no end in sight? I want to say, are you going to go for is it 500 episodes? Is it 1,000? What's the goal?
No, dude, it's going to be me in my grave, in my casket like this. They're just going to put the mic right next to my face as they close the fucking lid.
Thank God, because we need more Enormo in our lives. I love this show.
And I want to say something. The Run Out doesn't complain about the climbing crowds nearly as much as the Access Fund does. So I'm just going to say that. Every freaking update I get is everything's fucked.
Yeah, it's falling apart.
The crags are ruined.
Hammocks.
We don't stop.
The hammocks are overrunning the crag. Get the hammocks down.
You guys, relax. There's
it rained let me ask 9 days ago. Don't climb on the rocks. It's been 9 days.
Don't get me started on that.
I know. That's a trigger word.
You're talking about moving from trad to sport and performance and things like that. So what is your sort of pipe dream at the moment with the trajectory you're on? As far as climbing is concerned, you've made it this extremely important part of your life. You're probably doing what we all do, which is gathering time when you can to thinking about the project when you'd fall asleep and all those sorts of things. What's your little pipe dream at the moment as far as what's next, or what's your goals?
Focusing on the fall. So kind of short-term goal is, and this is a big goal. This one may not happen this fall, but there's this route called Easy Rider at the Red. That's a 13A. And so it would be my break into the 13s. Now I've only climbed as high as 12C, and I've only done one of those. So again, it's a stretch for me to do it, but I've been training hard and I think I can do it. But I've got a bunch of other routes for the fall that I'm excited about that are from the 11s up into 13. It's not really about chasing the grade as much, except it's a little bit about chasing the grade. So we'll see. I'm 43 years old. I got 2 kids and 2 jobs, and I want to get out once a week at minimum and see what I can take care of on these steep Red River Gorge routes this fall. The big dream, kind of the long lens dream, is to do some cool multi-pitch, big wall, and like expedition stuff. I just love being like, I love the exposure. I love being out. I love being like unplugged in a way. And sport climbing, I think probably for the next 5 years or something like that, if I were to just put like a guess on it, if I could push it kind of like solidly into the mid 13s, like I think the best grade, people tend to say the best grade at the Red is 13B. And so like if I could push into that where I could do some of those in, you know, like a handful of sessions or something, I think I'd have so much fun just climbing some of the absolute best climbs in this state. So that sounds fun. So, you know, short-term goal 13A this fall, then maybe get into the solid mid 13s so I can just take a bunch of really rad routes at the Red. But I want to get back, like I think this fall I'm going to try and get out to the Valley. Like I'd like to get out to the Bugaboos and I don't know, maybe Utah this winter. I was talking to Tom Randall, you know, he's going to be out there and I'm going to have him on the show. And I just, I want to get back into crack climbing. I want to get back into like multi-pitch and maybe some big wall stuff. So yeah, I don't know how to do that though. Like I just need to find more friends who are into that and just make it a priority. And right now, like you said, with the family, sport climbing is kind of a nice way to schedule the day and the week, and I don't have to be gone for 2 weeks. So if I can get out and do like, just stay sharp with my placements and anchor building and these kinds of things, just try to keep that muscle a little bit sharp. I think there'll be a time for that when my kids are a little bit older and I can go do some adventure-y stuff.
You know, the podcast project, you went through a season, you're building a second season. You know, if you could sum it up, like, what do you think the most satisfying thing has been, or the knowledge, the piece of knowledge that you've walked away with that, you know, you sat back, you decided on a second season, you said this was successful. What made it successful?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that. I mean, I just learned so much in season 1, and season 2's, you know, going to be banger as well. I think that my favorite chapter is the mental game chapter of every episode. And then Hazel Finlay did the kind of the masterclass look back at all of that. And it's really for me, like what, you know, for everybody, I think to some extent, what sets climbing apart. Otherwise we'd just be like lifting weights or doing hangboard all the time. But, you know, climbing it's problem solving and overcoming fears and tactics and these kinds of things. So the mental game chapter is what I'm most excited about for season 2 as well. And, you know, the lineup is really good. A good sampling from comp to boulder to sport to big wall. The takeaways are really great in training, nutrition, and tactics. But I think mental game is maybe what's most exciting for a lot of climbers. But I think maybe the overarching big takeaway is the first question I ask everybody is, what's your relationship with struggle? And without a doubt, every single one of these elite climbers has shown that not only do they enjoy struggle and discomfort, but they seek it out. And I think there's just like a lesson there for all of us, whether it's in our climbing or just in our lives, that like if you change the brain is wired, like if you listen to like Huberman Lab and those kinds of podcasts, like the brain is wired to avoid discomfort and to avoid struggle. We constantly are trying to take the path of least resistance. But if you can start to, through exposure therapy, train yourself to understand that struggle leads to more reward or more breakthrough, or even just enjoy the shit, like the type 2 fun of it, then you're going to have breakthroughs. And that's what these elite athletes, like every single one of them, have said. Like they are in it for the discomfort, knowing that there's a greater reward on the other side. So I've really enjoyed kind of looking at elite climbing through struggle, and season 2 is going to offer more of those kind of usable takeaways, like what's your fingerboard routine, but also like I think bigger things that are just more motivating to us regular climbers, where it's like we can dial in our fingerboard routine, but there's like a lot of motivation in the season. So yeah, I'm really psyched about that. And, you know, maybe I'll get to climb with some of these people again, like I did in season 1. That's just like a real treat and a dream as well. I'd like to climb with you too, Chris. Let's get out and do some stuff one day. That'd be such a dream, man.
Yeah, the Western Slope rules. Come on out. And if you kind of end up in the desert, you know, I'll definitely pop over. I have a relationship with Tom as well, and love climbing on the same stuff he's climbing on out there in the desert. So
yeah, I'd just be watching.
We could do that easily enough.
Thing. I'd have to find something far easier. But yeah, this is really cool, buddy. I appreciate you having me on and chatting. I look forward to having you on The Struggle. We get to crack open your noggin and look at your life and you're climbing and you're podcasting through the lens of struggle.
That'd be a lot of fun. I'm in.
Yeah, great. Thanks, man.
All right, folks, thanks for listening, and thanks to Ryan for sitting down. Nice professional connection. He knew what he was doing, used the equipment, the program, no technical issues, which is rare connecting on the internet. So I appreciate that. Also, a nice rapport. Let me think. Guy was like giving me a hard time right off the bat. Very enjoyable. Once again, if you need more climbing content, check out the Struggle Climbing Show, wherever you get your podcasts. Great one out right now with Mr. Tommy Caldwell. Today was the last day of Send-tember. How was it for you? Did you send? Well, next climbing pun, Rocktober, is up. Are you ready to rock your Tober? To send your rocks in Tober? Is there a pun for November? No sender? We need to come up with one, because actually November still is awesome. So December kind of starts to suck, unless you like ice climbing. Anyhow, hope you're getting out there. Hope you're fit, having fun, getting good weather, and of course, checking your knots.
Susan Sarandon! Oh, thank God! We have to stop the ceremony. Kim Jong-il is mad. Here, let me loose. I'll show you where the theater is.
All right.
No, Chris, stay away from her.
Fuck you, she wants to help us.
No, Chris. She's acting. I am not. The others tied me up because I wouldn't go along with their plans. Your skills are fading with age, Miss Sarandon.
You shall die a peasant's death!
Jesus, titty fucking Christ, I could have sworn she was telling the truth. That's why they call it acting.